Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of Aster-yee-ah. This is going to be a relatively short but special episode, a holiday episode for the season of December, and a reflection over what we've done in Aster-yee-ah so far before the coming new year. I'm going to be working on this particular area in this episode. This is going to be a memorial site in remembrance to the Christmas Truce of 1914, and a massive boulevard stretching from the Trēow neighborhood and into the Gebogenheit neighborhood. The Serendipity neighborhood will also be adjacent to this boulevard. Firstly, I'm going to extend the word beltway into Yugen, so we can have an official connection of the city center with the regional freeway pertaining to the game mechanics. I will first clear up the temporary road connections in this area for the workplace. The word beltway will cross over the river and submerge underground into Yugen. Again, in this city universe, the word beltway will act as a subterranean freight system with autonomous vehicles making deliveries and pickups. Since it will be connected to the regional freeway in the City Skylines universe, we'll have foreign freight and tourists coming in to satisfy the demands of industries and commercial buildings. The footprint of nearly every above-ground highway will be over existing roads, not over empty free land in most cases, because we want to minimize the footprint of these structures. Though noise would be a problem in the conventional sense, but I think the autonomous vehicles of the future would be ultra-silent and obviously eco-friendly, so pollution is not of a concern in this case for the surrounding environments. If I could, I would have high sound barriers on these highways, just in case, but I think that since the autonomous vehicles of the future are ultra-silent, it might be unnecessary, though driving on the highway will provide some nice views for a tourist or explorer without having a sound barrier obstructing the scenery of Aster-yee-ah. Now I do want to provide nice first-person shots of the city through these beltways for you guys. This is the completed interchange and bridge that will traverse over this river and leading into Yugen. I've allowed the one-way directional roads linked to this riverbed road because one of the ramps in the interchange go too low and obstructing the path of the road, so there is a U-road to continue down the one-way path. Now let's move on to the continuation of the word beltway. This will border the Trēow neighborhood and the Gebogenheit neighborhood, and will be in close proximity to the Trēow Boulevard. Here we have the word beltway in its first form. There will possibly be revisions in the future, like everything else in this city. I'll constantly work on improving or revising things in the city, as nothing is ever final on the first construction. But this is the main idea or foundation, if you will, of the word beltway, submerging under Yugen, and will have on and off ramps scattered throughout the Yugen center, connecting to this expressway. In future episodes, I will extend these rail lines from Yugen to meet at Gebogenheit station. The other two lines here will stop at Place de l'Entente, and then go across Lake Yakima's. Another line will go into Gebogenheit neighborhood. Starting on the boulevard, I've decided to name it the Trēow Boulevard. Trēow comes from Old English meaning true. There are a few descendants from this Old English word in modern English, such as trust and truth, but this word also means tree. But why? This word goes back as early as the Proto-Indo-European language, a linguistic reconstruction of a mother language for most European and Central South Asian languages. In Proto-Indo-European, tree is believed to be Trēow. In Sanskrit, an ancient language of India, is Dru. In modern Greek, Tris means oak tree. So what's so special about tree and true about it? Well, it is said that if a tree is given the right conditions, it will always be true and bearing fruit for the next harvest. True doesn't always mean factual, but also loyal and trustworthy, such as the expression to remain true, meaning to stay loyal. Trees have been loyal to our early civilizations, and even now. Today we use terms like tree huggers in a more derogative connotation for someone who loves the environment and wants to protect it, going as far as hugging a tree to prevent it from getting cut down. As funny or negative that might be, trees do play an important part in cultures all over the world. Going by the definition, trees have been loyal to us for thousands of years, allowing us to use them for building houses, making weapons or tools or fire, bearing food to feed us, providing the air we breathe, and giving us shade or shelter from the elements. There are other equivalents in Europe like Trēow having slightly different meanings but still pertains to trees, such as derived in Polish for firewood or Welsh derwin for oak tree like the Greek word dris. The fact that it also branches out to meaning oak shows the importance of how oak trees shaped the language and culture of this early Proto-Indo-European civilization, and then ultimately most of Europe and half of Asia. An example expression of how it affects our culture and language: he is strong as an oak. shows the sturdiness and fidelity of the oak tree as it provides itself as the most common hardwood. And this is why I love etymology, as it really sheds light on history of how people lived and thought about things. When you hear the word Trēow or its other equivalents, you may also hear the word druid, which were priests or scholars from ancient Celtic tribes in Britain and Gaul, which is modern-day France, who worship oak trees, believing they house deities. There's one word that descended from Trēow that I want to particularly speak about though: truce. In the center of this boulevard will be a memorial site for the Christmas Truce of 1914. I've lined the entire boulevard with a bountiful amount of trees and courtyards. I want it to be a destination, symbolically, as a place to remain faithful and true among friends. A truce is an agreement among different parties to live in peace, settling a predicament. And with this, new or old friendships will have the potential to grow as strong and steadfast as an oak. I think this strip of land can be used among the citizens of Aster-yee-ah to either bike or take long strolls across a dense cityscape. It's a fairly simple boulevard that is long and linear, but it crosses over many different adjacent neighborhoods that are each uniquely vibrant. When it comes to war, we tend to remember tragedies more than good moments. Well, what good comes from war anyway? The Christmas Truce was certainly a rare and unique event that took place in one of the most bloodiest conflicts in human history. World War I has always been an event overshadowed by its bigger brother, World War II, and people typically attribute World War I as boring due to its stalemate nature by trench warfare, but there's hardly anything boring about millions of people dying. The Christmas Truce of 1914 was a unique but often exaggerated event in history. But what do I mean by exaggerated? Well, this event has been surfacing the past few decades after being lost and overshadowed by bigger events in history, and it is often painted as a huge event that all soldiers on the Western Front in France somehow joined together in a temporary truce. But that is not the reality. The Great War continued to ravage on. Killing did indeed continue on Christmas Day on many parts of the Western Front. However, in some isolated areas along the front, there were some temporary truces that did take place, very small and localized ceasefires. According to accounts, it typically began with the singing of Christmas songs, such as Silent Night or Stille Nacht by the Germans. In areas where enemy trenches were often a few feet away or reasonably close to hear the enemy, this is where the Christmas truce likely arose. Candles were placed on the parapets of trenches, and eventually the tenseful atmosphere cooled down in the middle of winter. British and French soldiers were curious and cautiously peeked over the parapets to see what was going on. It appeared that candles and even some small pine trees were lined along the German trenches. As German soldiers noticed the French and British soldiers peering over the trenches and gazing over no man's land, officers from both sides steadily got out and met up in the middle of the war zone to consider an unofficial ceasefire. Eventually, the regular soldiers of both sides met in no man's land, exchanging gifts like chocolate, wine, or clothing to warm one another. There are many second-hand accounts that soldiers even played football or soccer for Americans with the enemy. But it's most likely estimated that only about 200 out of 200,000 soldiers participated in these actual sporting activities. Funeral and church services were held as soldiers of both sides buried their dead in no man's land. The Christmas Truce, however, was not the only truce that took place in World War I. In fact, there were many localized unofficial truces or mutinies. These truces were birthed by an attitude called live or let live, which was an idea that people can choose to live the way they do and should allow others to do the same. This was brought on by the harsh living conditions in the trenches, where soldiers dwelled with the constant fear of being blown up by artillery or killed by sniper fire, walking in mud-filled trenches with deteriorating boots, the stench of rotting corpses everywhere, and infestation by rats and bugs. You could see how this drove many people insane, which coined the famous term shell shock, which in its alternative modern form, post-traumatic stress disorder. Most of these soldiers were ordinary citizens living ordinary lives prior to the Great War, and having stripped their normal lives away for a hellish life in holes really provoked intense feelings of homesickness or questions of what was the meaning of all this, when the typical strategies at the time involved very high casualties with little success, thus resulting in fraternization with the enemy or mutinous rebellion. When news got out of the Christmas Truce to high command on both sides, they were determined to eliminate any feelings or memory of this incident, as it would destroy morale of troops. Reports were burned, and they even went as far as killing the soldiers who participated in these events as punishment for cowardice. Soldiers were forced to shoot their new friends in the enemy trenches, or they were transported to other parts of the front, away from their comrades. Propaganda started to circulate on the home fronts, demonizing fraternization as it costed many lives in battle, and people with peaceful or anti-war agendas were targeted and harassed for not helping the war efforts. The 3 following Christmases of the Great War either had no truce or suppressed truces. Eventually, the memory of such an event was lost until accounts of soldiers eventually surfaced after the war. Peace is definitely fragile, but the Christmas Truce of 1914 is a chilling realization that if you had the courage and willingness to do so, peace can be secured. And it also takes commitment, trust, and wisdom to maintain it. I want to name this area Place de l'Entente, after the word entente, which you may have heard in history class with the Triple Entente, an alliance in World War I consisting of 3 nations, France, Great Britain, and Russia. But I guess you could play with this term a little bit for the Christmas Truce, and say that the alliance consisted of French, German, and British soldiers. Entente is a French word meaning a friendly understanding between different parties, and this word is not just used for political or military situations such as nations, but can also be used casually among family and friends whenever they realize they've reached a mutual and friendly understanding of one another. On that evening, these soldiers did understand each other about the suffering they've been through, and they were willing enough to cooperate to put the suffering to an end. However, this peace will not last among them, but his memory will continue to live on and inspire us each day. I hope you guys have a great Christmas, despite if you celebrate it or not, but I also wish you guys a Happy New Year. This is the end of this episode, and I hope you like it. What I want to do now is, let's go over the areas that have been constructed so far in Aster-yee-ah, and look forward into the future for new developments for the coming year.